The rancher found the girl tied to a dying juniper tree, rope biting into her wrists, head slumped forward like a prayer abandoned mid-breath. No scream, no plea, just the dry creak of weathered limbs, the flapping of a bloodied cloth caught in the wind, and the soft drip of something wet hitting sun-scorched soil. A desert cottontail hung upside down from a low branch above her, its neck broken, eyes glazed, tongue slack. A crude piece of tin was nailed into the bark with shaky letters carved in charcoal. The whites take what they want. Eli McCrae stood still, rifle slung loosely in his left hand, right boot half buried in grit. He blinked once against the sinking sun. At first he thought she was a vision, heat hallucination, maybe the face of a ghost he deserved to see. But no mirage bleeds like that, and the mare, tethered just 20 yards off, had stiffened ears pointed, breath held. Animals didn't see ghosts, they smelled pain. The wind shifted, and with it came the scent of copper, sagebrush, and charred leather. If you feel the chill of the desert rising already, drop a BA in the comments or type 1 if you want more Wild West love stories. Eli adjusted his hat low against the sun. The light bled behind the Kurawa Mountains in hues of rust, like God himself had scorched the edge of the sky. The kind of evening he once thought beautiful, before he stopped noticing beauty. Before the war, before the grave next to his cabin, held the only person he'd ever truly loved. The silence of this land was different tonight. Not peaceful, not earned. Cracked. Something in his chest, twisted old muscle, old memory. He moved forward, boots crunching dry soil, each step steady, measured, like approaching a wounded cougar. This was no trap, no decoy, just a girl. But what kind of girl, he didn't know yet. Her face was turned from him, strands of black hair stuck to her cheek with blood. She was breathing, barely, her ribs trembling like a fledgling bird in a hunter's palm. Her clothes, if you could call them, that were little more than a deerskin tunic and a piece of Navajo weaving across her shoulders, soaked and stiff with blood. Maybe 18, maybe younger. Her legs were scraped raw, feet bare and blistered. Eli knelt beside her, the rifle lowered but not out of reach. "Miss," he said, his voice cracked like dried timber. "You alive?" No answer. He reached for the rope-frayed hemp, tight around swollen wrists. She flinched at his touch, even unconscious. Her body curled slightly, a reflex, like a child waiting for another blow. "Shit," Eli muttered, half curse, half prayer. He looked around. No tracks, but the wind had been hard. Whatever bastards did this were long gone. She moaned then, low, animal. Her eyes fluttered, open dark eyes, the kind that didn't plead, didn't soften, just watched. Her mouth moved. Slow. One word. Barely air. "Ghost." Eli stiffened. "You know me?" Her lip cracked when she smiled. Not from humor, something sharper. Recognition, or warning. "You carry death," she whispered in accented English. "But you hesitate." He didn't know whether to take it as insult or insight. "Better to hesitate than pull too quick," he replied. "Unless you want blood on your hands." "I already do," she rasped, her gaze locking with his. "So do you." Silence again, just wind and dying sun. He cut the rope. She fell against him with the dead weight of someone too long without water, too long without hope. Her skin burned with fever. He caught her before she hit the ground. "You got a name?" he asked, lifting her gently. She coughed. "Nia." "All right then, Nia. Let's get you out of the goddamn sun." Back at the cabin, Eli laid her on the cot, boiled water, and cursed himself for getting involved. The blood on her shoulder had dried in thick patches. The bullet was still in their low graze, but ugly. "Drink this," he said, offering water. She took it with shaking hands, didn't thank him. "I didn't ask you to save me," she said between sips. "Didn't do it for thanks." He cleaned the wound. She hissed, but didn't cry. That told him more than words. She was used to pain, or maybe just too used to it. "You got family nearby?" he asked. "Dead." "Friends?" "Also, dead." He paused, gauze in hand. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" She stared at the ceiling for a long time, then turned to face the wall. They came at dawn. Men with blue coats, not soldiers. They wore smiles when they burned our tents. called us pests, said we were in the way. My brother tried to fight. They gutted him and laughed. Then they tied me up like bait. Left me with that damn rabbit, like I was an animal." Her voice didn't break. That scared Eli more than screaming. "You're lucky I found you," he said quietly. She turned her head slowly, her cheek pressing into the wool. "You're lucky. I didn't die. Now I remember." Something flickered in Eli's chest. Not fear, not pity, recognition. A long time ago, he'd seen a girl, not much older, soaked in blood, crushed under a wagon wheel after the Shenandoah ambush. His sister, the same look in her eyes, half gone, half burning. He'd buried her under a cottonwood with shaking hand. "I lost someone too," he said finally. 12 years ago. To men just like that." Nia closed her eyes. "Then why do you still hesitate?" He didn't answer. But later that night, when he sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching the moon rise over Chiricahua like a pale ghost, he realized he no longer felt alone in the silence. Something had cracked. Not just the sky, but the shell he'd buried himself in. And somewhere inside the cabin, a girl with a scar on her shoulder had started dreaming again. The moon hung low that night, not round and silver like poets dream, but warped lopsided like a cracked plate held too long over fire. Its glow spilled unevenly over the New Mexico basin, casting jagged shadows from the porch posts of Eli's cabin to the rocky outcrops behind the barn. Somewhere to the north, a coyote sang not a call of hunger, but something lonelier. Eli didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the doorframe, boots planted firm on the dusty boards, rifle laid flat across his lap. His right hand traced the worn edge of the stock, the grooves where knuckles had clung tight through battles, through death, through that day he buried his sister under the cottonwood tree by the Rio Chama. The scar across his left collarbone, still tight in cold weather, pulsed like a ghost finger pressing into bone. Inside, behind the thin door, Nia stirred. She hadn't said another word after sundown, but he'd heard her breathings low, shallow, sometimes catching like a horse startled in sleep. Once, she whimpered. Once, she whispered in Navajo. Words he didn't understand, but tone he did. Desperation, maybe prayer, maybe promise. He told himself he'd take her to town come morning. Find Doc Merriweather. Maybe old widow Anna could offer food or a place to sleep. He'd hand her off, like passing a burden. That was the plan. But something inside him didn't trust that plan. Or maybe it didn't trust the town. The town had always had too many mouths and too few eyes. They called him Ghost, not just for how he moved, but for how he didn't speak, how he watched, how he disappeared for weeks and returned with blood on his boots and guilt under his nails. They wouldn't help Nia. Not really. Not someone marked the way she was. Brown skin, tribal braids, eyes that held knives instead of fear. He'd seen what they did to boys with stolen horses. He didn't want to see what they'd do to a girl who survived a massacre and didn't bow her head. Just before dawn, the door creaked. He looked up. Nia stood in the doorway, wrapped in his old army coat, sleeves dragging past her hands. She didn't speak, just stood there, framed by blue-gray sky and the first pale light, hair tangled and face unreadable. "You should be resting," Eli said quiet. "I didn't come here to rest," she said. Her voice was low, but steady. Eli stood slowly. "Then what did you come here for?" "To remember. To choose." A pause. Wind shuffled through mesquite leaves. "Choose what?" She stepped onto the porch, bare feet silent against the worn wood. "Whether to keep running, or to go back and finish what I started." Eli studied her face. The bruising had begun to yellow along her jaw. Her eyes were clearer now, but not softer. "You got a death wish?" he asked. She smiled then. Not bitter, not sweet, just real. "Not anymore." Eli nodded slowly. "Then you'd better sit. I got coffee and bad bread." She did. He handed her a tin mug. She sipped, grimaced. "You drink this willingly?" "I've had worse." "Though?" They sat in silence for a long while, the sun dragging itself higher, like it, too, didn't want to face the day. Finally, she spoke again. "You asked last night about my family. You said they were gone. They are." She looked at the edge of the horizon, But not just from bullets, they were gone before that. From the inside. He didn't interrupt. My father, she continued, believed in trading with settlers. Said the old ways couldn't feed us anymore. My uncle hated him for it. Said we were losing our soul for flour and sugar. And you? I just wanted to ride, breathe, not pick sides. Her hands tightened on the mug. But when the fire came, they didn't care which side we were on. They didn't care we made peace. They killed the old, the children. Left me with a message. Her voice shook then. Just a little. That rabbit, that tin, that rope. I was their warning to others. Eli looked out across the land. I buried warning signs too, he said after a moment. She turned to him. My sister Lizzie, 12 years old, smart, sang to the horses at night. We were heading west when a group of mercs attacked our wagon. Said we had southern gold. Said we looked like traitors. She died because I hesitated. Because I tried to talk first. Did you find them? 3 of them, not enough. They fell silent again. But now it wasn't empty silence. It was shared. After a while, Nia whispered, they said you were a ghost. Some Navajos speak of a man with gray eyes who finds the dying in the desert. They say he smells of smoke and regret. Eli raised an eyebrow. What else do they say? That he walks alone because everything he touches burns. He looked at her. And yet you're here. She shrugged. Maybe I'm fireproof. He almost smiled. Almost. Later that day, as they fed the horses, she insisted on helping despite the sling he fashioned for her arm. Eli noticed something strange. She wasn't just stronger. She was watching him too, measuring. At one point, she said softly, you could have left me. I didn't. Why? He adjusted the saddle straps. Because someone should have done the same for Lizzie. She looked at him for a long moment. You think saving me fixes that? But maybe it stops me from becoming one of them. Who? The ones who just watch. She said nothing. Then, gently, she reached out and placed her palm on his chest, right over the scar. It still hurts? Every time I breathe. She nodded. Good. That means it's not dead. That night, as they sat beneath the stars, sharing dried apples in silence, Eli asked, if you go back, what happens? I finish what I started. You kill him? If justice won't, I will. He looked at her. And after that, I don't know. He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn silver locket. Inside, a sketch-faded pencil lines of a young girl laughing, drawn in haste, in love. He handed it to her. She had your eyes when she was angry. Nat. Nia stared at the drawing for a long time. Then she closed the locket gently and handed it back. She'd want you to live. She's dead. Yes, but you're not. Eli looked up at the stars, at the space between them, the places ghosts drifted. He didn't speak again. But when Nia leaned her head lightly against his shoulder that night, he didn't flinch. He just breathed. And for the first time in years, it didn't hurt as much. The wind changed before the hooves could be heard. Eli had lived too long with blood on his boots to mistake that kind of silence, the kind that coils low to the ground before exploding. It was mid-morning, sun already punishing the earth with 96 degrees, and the sagebrush shimmered like glass. He stood in the barn doorway, sweat dampening his collar, hand resting against the cool iron of the shotgun hung on the wall. Nia was at the well, sleeves rolled, fetching water with the quiet grace of someone raised with silence as inheritance. Her sling was gone, the wound on her shoulder still raw, but she moved like a woman who refused to limp. Dust coated her shins, a thin braid swung behind her back. She hadn't asked to stay. She hadn't asked anything, but she'd stayed. That morning she had sung, not loud, not for him, but for the desert, a low Navajo melody, something ancient, older than his bones. And when it reached him through the wind, Eli had stopped stacking fence posts and just listened. And that was when he felt it, a ripple in the stillness, a wrongness in the rhythm. He looked east, then he saw them. 3 riders, black silhouettes against the sun-glared trail, just cresting over Bone Ridge. No dust cloud behind them, smart bastards. Rode slow, careful, meant to be invisible. But they weren't ghosts, just men. And Eli had killed enough of them to know their kind. Company, he muttered. Nia turned, still holding the bucket. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Her breath hitched. I know that horse." "No." Eli didn't ask how. Instead, he crossed the yard in 5 strides, took the bucket from her hands, set it aside, and grabbed his rifle. "Inside. Now." She didn't move. "Nia." Her voice was low. "He's with them. The one who wore my father's necklace after they killed him." That froze Eli. The edges of the sky felt too bright now, too thin. "You sure?" She nodded once. "I braided that necklace when I was 10. The beads were turquoise, from my mother." Eli's jaw tightened. "All right. We don't run." She turned to him, startled. "We don't. They're looking to test the waters, not storm the gate, yet." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then what do? We show teeth." The riders didn't dismount. They stopped 20 paces from the fence. Dust clung to their boots and spurs. One wore a black hat too stiff to be honest. Another, tall and lean, toyed with a knife between gloved fingers. The third, the one on the palomino, had Nia's necklace tied around his saddle horn like a trophy. Eli stepped forward, rifle cradled in his arms, steady as death. "You're a long way from anywhere," he called. The man with the necklace spat to the side. "Heard you got something don't belong to you." Eli didn't blink. "You heard wrong. We're just here for the girl." Eli's voice dropped. "Ain't no girl here. Just someone you tried to hang and failed." That silenced them for a breath. Then the man in black chuckled. "You must be the ghost they talk about." Eli smiled, cold. "Funny thing about ghosts. They don't die easy." The third man, tall one, leaned forward. "This don't have to get bloody." Eli's boots crunched forward half a step. "It already did. Back when you left her for dead." Palomino sneered. "She's a liar." She slit Saul's throat in his sleep. Behind him, from the cabin porch, Nia stepped into view. She wore no coat now, only the leather tunic, wound-bound. Her shoulders were square, her voice steady. "He raped my cousin. He carved my back and said he'd do worse if I screamed." The air snapped like a whip. Silence. Palomino's smirk faded. "You've got no proof." "Zay." Nia lifted something from behind her Eli's old saddlebag. She tossed a blood-stained piece of cloth onto the dirt in front of the horse. "This was his. Still got his name stitched inside. You think I kept it for comfort?" The tall man looked down, looked away. Palomino growled. "She's a savage. You believe her over your own kind?" Eli raised the rifle then, slow and deliberate. "I believe scars. Hers talk louder than your damn mouth." No one moved. The sky was too blue, the world too still. Then Palomino twitched. Eli fired. The bullet clipped the edge of his saddle horn, blew the necklace clean off. The beads scattered like teeth on the ground. Palomino yelped and nearly fell from his horse. The others reared. Eli's voice was ice. "Next one goes between the eyes." The men backed their horses slowly. "You'll regret this," Black Hat hissed. Eli didn't lower the rifle. "Already do. For not shooting sooner. Len." The riders turned, spurred, vanished into the brush like bad dreams fleeing sunrise. That evening, the necklace lay on the table between them. The turquoise was cracked. Blood still stained the string. Nia didn't touch it. Eli poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup and passed it over. She didn't drink right away. "I thought I'd want to kill him," she said finally. "You still might." "Number." She stared at the necklace. He looked small, hollow, like the fire that drove him burned out a long time ago. Eli leaned back. "Sometimes revenge is a hungry dog. You feed it and it turns on you." She looked up. "Then what now?" Eli didn't answer at first. He picked up a bead, smoothed it between thumb and forefinger. "You could leave. Start new. No ghosts." She didn't smile. "I don't want to forget, I just don't want to rot." Eli nodded. "There's room here. Shade, water, quiet. You inviting me?" He shrugged. "I ain't good at talking, but I'm better with fences than farewells." She took the cup, drank slow, then whispered, "I'll stay. Until the wind changes." Eli looked at her, at the quiet steel in her eyes, the kind of woman who doesn't break, just bends like willow and waits for the storm to pass. "Fair enough," he said. Outside, the wind rustled low. Somewhere behind the ridge, coyotes cried. But this time it sounded less like mourning, more like memory. The first rain came 2 nights later. Not a storm, no fury in it. Just a gentle, unexpected fall, like the sky had finally exhaled. It didn't last long. The desert didn't drink easily, but it was enough to make the roof creak and the earth give off that holy scent, wet dust and juniper and old promises. Eli stood barefoot on the porch, shirt open, letting it soak through the scars that tracked his chest like a map of things he didn't speak of. Beside him, Naya stepped out from the shadows, bare feet silent on the wood, a thin blanket around her shoulders. She didn't speak. She just watched the rain like it was an old friend returning from war. He glanced over. "You believe in signs?" She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Not the kind carved in wood. But sometimes the wind tells you things. The wind ever tell you you're safe?" "Number." Her eyes flicked to his. "But it tells me when I'm not alone." Eli looked away. The truth sat heavy in his chest like wet ash. He wasn't sure when her presence had stopped feeling like a disruption. Maybe it was the way she sang while gutting rabbits, or how she spoke to his mare in Navajo, and the damn thing started following her like a dog. Maybe it was the way her silence didn't demand to be filled. Or maybe it was because for the first time in a long while, his cabin didn't feel haunted. They fell into rhythm. Days passed like beads on a necklace, feeding stock, fixing the east fence, grinding corn by lantern light. She insisted on pulling her weight. He let her. He stopped pretending she was temporary. She stopped pretending she didn't notice the way his shoulders tensed when he heard hooves in the distance. But peace in the desert never lasts. Not for ghosts. Not for girls marked by flame. It came one morning, 5 days after the standoff, when Eli rode into town for supplies. Town was still the same. 4 streets, 3 drunks, 1 sheriff too old to shoot straight. He didn't tie his horse outside the saloon like the others. He tied her near the church, quieter ground, less chance of trouble. But trouble doesn't care where you park your horse. He was halfway out the door of the dry goods store when he heard it. "McCrae." Eli turned. The voice was low, clipped. "Sheriff Hobbs." The old man looked like desert woodsun, warped and brittle, but still rooted. "Need a word," Hobbs said. Eli followed him to the shaded side of the church. No one nearby. Just the sound of wind and the occasional creak of a loose shutter. "You been harboring a Navajo girl out at your place?" Eli didn't flinch. "What if I have? She's wanted. Territory marshal came through yesterday. Said she's a suspect in the killing of a man named Saul Devlin. Claims she slit his throat and robbed him." "She didn't rob him. Did she kill him?" Eli's jaw tightened. "In self-defense." Hobbs sighed. "I ain't saying I believe the marshal, but word's spreading. Some of Devlin's kin are stirring up noise. Men who ride for coin, not law." Eli's fingers curled. "I'll deal with it." "You planning to shoot your way through it?" Hobbs asked. "If I have to." The sheriff nodded once. "Just remember there's some things a bullet can't fix." Eli turned without a word. He rode back faster than usual, and Nia was waiting on the porch when he arrived. Arms crossed, face still. "You saw Hobbs," she said. He nodded. "I felt it in my chest before I saw your face. He says the marshal's spreading word. That you're wanted." She looked down at her hands. "He's not wrong. You killed Devlin. I didn't lie about that. But I didn't slit his throat in his sleep. I challenged him." Eli blinked. "You what?" "It's how we handle shame. In the old ways. I told him to face me." He laughed. "Said women don't get to demand justice." Then he reached for his pistol. Eli swallowed. "I was faster," she finished. "I left the knife in his hand. But they don't remember that part. Because they don't want to." She looked up. "Do you?" The question wasn't simple. He thought of Lizzie, of the men who smiled while lying, of the look in Devlin's eyes sewn he'd seen before on too many dead men. Disbelief that death would come for them too. "I believe in justice," Eli said finally. "Not law, not always." Nia stepped closer. "Then we need to go, tonight." He shook his head. "Running makes you guilty in their eyes. So does being born brown." The words hit him like a thrown rock. Not because they hurt him, but because they were true. He sat heavily on the porch rail. "I never had to fight for the right to exist." "No," she said gently. "But now you do." They locked eyes, and that was when he made his decision. They left before dawn, packed light, 1 bag each, rifle and bow. took the canyon pass west toward Red Bluff a place Naya claimed held someone who had witnessed Devlin's death and hadn't yet been paid to forget it. Eli didn't ask why, she'd never mentioned this before. She didn't ask why he came without a fight. They traveled silent for hours, horses picking their way through stone and shadow. Hawks circled above. The desert seemed to hold its breath. It was Nia who finally broke the silence. "Do you ever think we're all just echoes?" Eli raised an eyebrow. "Echoes of what?" "Of the ones who came before. My mother used to say the land remembers. It holds grief like stone holds heat." He thought of the grave back home, of how the earth cracked around it each summer. "Then I guess we're trying to break the cycle," he said. "Or carry it." A silence. Not empty, just full of everything they hadn't said yet. They camped under a rock shelf that night. Eli started the fire. Nia skinned a rabbit. When they sat down to eat, she said softly, "You never asked what Devlin said before I killed him." Eli met her eyes. She spoke with no bitterness, just memory. He said, "You think killing me will make them see you? You'll still be a dog in the dirt to them." Eli chewed slowly. "What did you say?" "I said, I'm not killing you so they see me. I'm killing you so I remember myself." He nodded, then reached out and touched her hand. Not a gesture of comfort, a gesture of respect. The town of Red Bluff didn't look like justice. It looked like heat waves on iron rooftops, rusted signs creaking in the wind, and too many boots outside the saloon before noon. But it was here, under a blistering July sky, that Nia walked straight into the lion's den, spine straight, chin high, eyes like obsidian. Eli followed 5 paces behind, not because he didn't want to stand beside her, but because this was her fire to walk through. His job now wasn't to lead, it was to witness, and if need be, burn with her. The marshal's horse was still at the hitching post outside the sheriff's office. Eli recognized the saddle, too polished. A man who rode more papers than trails. Inside, Sheriff Hobbs looked up from a ledger. He didn't stand. "You come to turn yourself in?" he asked Nia, voice rough as gravel. She shook her head. "I came to give you the name of a liar." Eli closed the door behind them. Marshal Reed was in the corner. Clean boots, tin badge, dead eyes. "I don't take kindly to fugitives barging in," he said, adjusting his belt. "And I don't take kindly to men who sell truth for a paycheck," Nia snapped back. Reed's lips curled. "Careful, girl." Eli stepped forward once, slow and deliberate. "That girl's got a name, Nia Redmoon, and she's got a witness." The door opened behind them. A young man entered, barely 20, dusty boots, thick braid tucked into his collar. His name was Tayo, son of the tribe's old storyteller. He had been there that night, hiding, watching. "I saw Saul Devlin reach for his pistol first," Tayo said, voice calm. "He laughed when she challenged him, called her a dog. She gave him a chance to stand like a man. He chose to die like a coward." Marshal Reed snorted. "And what makes you think I'll take the word of another savage?" That was when Eli stepped fully forward, eyes like gunmetal. "You don't have to. The word's already gone to Judge Harwell in Santa Fe, along with your list of bounties signed against dead men who never got trial." Reed paled. "We know what you are," Nia said, quiet but hard. "And if the law won't hang you, your silence will." Sheriff Hobbs exhaled long. He looked tired, like a man who'd carried too many secrets for too long. "I'm done protecting snakes," he muttered. Then to Reed, "Drop the badge." It clattered to the floor. Just like that, it was over. But the silence that followed wasn't victory. It was relief. And something else, something Eli hadn't felt since before the war. Peace. They left Red Bluff that afternoon. No parades. No applause. Just dust on their boots, and the sun warm on their backs. Halfway back to the canyon trail, Nia said, "I don't want to go back to just surviving." Eli looked at her. "Then let's build something." "Like what?" "A place. For those like us." She raised an eyebrow. "Ghosts and outcasts?" "Survivors," he corrected. "People with fire that doesn't burn anymore, but still lights the way." And so they stayed. The cabin became more than a hiding place. Eli cut new beams. Nia planted sage and corn. They built a second shelter, then a third. By fall, 4 women from burned villages arrived. 2 boys who'd fled bounty hunters. A pregnant widow. a half-blind preacher who no longer believed in fire and brimstone, but could still teach children to read. They called the place Low Hollow because it sat in a basin shielded by stone, and because pain settled low before it lifted. Nia carved her father's necklace into the new threshold, not to forget what happened, but to remember what they'd risen from. One night, under a sky littered with stars, Nia sat beside Eli on the porch. The air smelled of mesquite and baked bread. Laughter echoed from the other cabins. "You think we're healed?" she asked softly. He stared ahead. "Number. Then what are we?" "Getting better." She leaned against him, not for comfort, but because home was no longer a place. It was a person who stayed when the storms came. "I don't dream of knives anymore," she whispered. "I dream of seeds." "This." Eli placed his hand over hers. "That's how you know," he said. "How?" "When the dreams stop screaming." On the first anniversary of her rescue, they held a small fire circle, not to mourn, but to remember. Each person placed something into the flames, a token of the past, a lie, a name, a scar. When it came to Nia, she held up the last turquoise bead from her father's necklace. "Once this marked me as prey," she said. "Now it marks a path." She dropped it in. The flames rose, but did not burn. They built Low Hollow with more grit than lumber. The first winter was brutal. Sharp winds screamed down from the Chiricahua cliffs, snapping the clotheslines and icing over the troughs by dawn. The second shelter Eli put up caved in during a dust storm. A calf died from snakebite. Their last tin of coffee spilled in the dirt. But they didn't leave. Nia refused. "This land already took everything from me once," she said, her voice steady as a drumbeat. "I won't let it take what I've rebuilt." "Olu." Eli nodded, bloody knuckles raw from hammering new beams. "Then we give it no choice." They hauled stone with rope and will, cut cedar until the axe handle split. Nia learned how to mend boots with pine tar and thread. Eli learned how to boil yucca root so the kids wouldn't starve. And when the coyotes came too close, it was Nia who lifted the rifle, who fired one shot clean through the dark, and said nothing afterward. That night, the children slept easier, and Eli realized something strange. He no longer dreamed of the battlefield. By early spring, the land softened. Creosote bloomed. The creek that had run dry for 5 years flowed again thin as thread, but alive. They used it to grow beans and corn. Nia tended the rows every morning, fingers in the soil, eyes always on the edge of the canyon, watching, listening. Trust, she once said, was not the same as peace. And yet, Eli began to trust the quiet. It was a different silence than before, not the silence of loss, but the silence after forgiveness. One morning, as the sun broke over the ridge like a golden blade, a man came riding into the hollow. He wasn't armed, no badge, just calloused hands and a look that said he'd carried more grief than a saddlebag could hold. His name was Matthew Rios. He had been a scout in the 5th Infantry. He said nothing of battles, but when he saw Nia, he removed his hat and dropped to one knee. "I was there the day Devlin rode into your camp," he said. "I was told to turn my back." "Oh." Nia didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Why come now?" Rios looked up, eyes bloodshot but clear. "Because I saw what you did. Because I left that night knowing I just let a girl be hunted like a deer. And because if I don't help build something better, I'll keep dying over and over every time I sleep." She didn't offer a hand, but she said, "There's fence that needs fixing." That night, he stayed. 2 weeks later, he carved a cradle out of hickory for the widow's baby. More came. Not many. Never too many. Just enough. A woman named Sarah brought chickens and her 7-year-old daughter, who hadn't spoken since her father was shot in front of her during a robbery in El Paso. 2 brothers from Taos brought goats and flutes, and a silence even deeper than Nia's. An old black seamstress named Hattie rode in with a bag of needles and a hymn in her throat that made the children stop and listen. Every soul who came carried a scar, and every scar was folded into the fabric of Low Hollow. One warm evening in late summer, Nia sat beside the corn rows, her feet bare in the soil. Eli walked over with a tin cup of cool water, wiped sweat from his brow, and sat beside her without a word. She spoke first. "Do you think this will last?" Ellie took a slow sip. doesn't matter. She looked at him. What matters is that we built it anyway. She smiled then. Tired, but real. I used to think healing was forgetting, she said. But now I think it's remembering without bleeding. Eli nodded. He looked out at the hollow. Children chasing a goat. Hattie teaching stitches under the porch. Matthew playing a slow hymn on the harmonica. The wind smelled of earth and bread and evening rain. Funny, he said. I built this place with my hands, but I think you're the one who raised it. Nia chuckled softly. You gave it the bones. I just taught it how to breathe. He turned to her, and this time, he didn't hesitate. His hand reached out. She took it. No fanfare, no speech. Just fingers entwined like two roots meeting under the soil. Silent and strong. A week later, a letter arrived, brought by a drifter boy with sunburned skin and a toothpick grin. It was sealed with the emblem of the territorial court. Inside, Judge Harwell's signature stamped across a declaration. All charges against Nia Redmoon formally dismissed. The witness account submitted under the oath of Tayo of the Red Mesa Band has been accepted as truth. Case closed. Nia read it once, then set it on the table. I don't need paper to tell me I'm free, she said. But later that night, Eli found her standing outside, staring at the moon. You okay? He asked. She shrugged, just thinking how long it takes the moon to stop feeling like a witness. Eli stepped closer. You're not being watched anymore, Nia. Not by them. She turned to him. Then by who? He didn't speak, just looked at her. Let her see that his watching was different, not of suspicion, but of reverence. Autumn came with gold leaves and clean skies. They held their first harvest feast. Goat stew, beans, roasted squash, a sweet cake Hattie insisted on baking, even though the sugar was coarse and the flour rough. Tayo carved a flute solo. The children performed a silly play about Ghost Man and the girl who shot back. Everyone laughed, even Nia, even Eli. And as the fire burned low and the stars blinked overhead like embers in God's eye, Nia stood. She held a single turquoise bead in her hand. This came from a necklace my father wore, she said. Once it marked my shame, now it marks my choice. She looked at each face in the fire, light-scarred, sunburnt, smiling. You are my people now. And she dropped the bead into the flame. The fire flared, but did not consume. The next morning, Eli rose early. He found Nia already up, standing near the cottonwood tree they'd planted behind the cabins. It wasn't tall yet, but it had grown, stubborn and alive. He stepped beside her. She didn't look at him, just said, "This is where I want to be buried, when it's time." Eli nodded. "Not yet, though," she added. He smiled. "Not for a long time." They stood there, wordless, two figures beneath a sky so wide it made the past look small. And for the first time in a lifetime, nothing hurt. Not the scars, not the wind, not the memory, only the breath between them, and the fire that no longer burned, but warmed. Epilogue. Years later, travelers would speak of a place out west where the broken were made whole. They said the desert bloomed where it shouldn't, that a ghost lived there who taught children to track stars, that a woman with a scar on her shoulder knew the names of every wind. Some called it myth, but those who made it there knew the truth. There are fires that destroy, and fires that make you new.